The moment I stepped past the eighth princess, the entire ballroom went quiet, and I felt every eye in the building lock onto my back like a targeting laser. I was not supposed to be the center of attention that night. I was supposed to stand near the door, keep my eyes on the exits, and make sure nobody tried anything foolish during the signing of the Threll Accords. That was the job. Security duty. Watch the crowd, watch the doors, stay invisible. Nobody told me I would end up in the middle of the room with 9 alien princesses staring at me and an entire alliance holding its breath. It started with a custom nobody explained to me properly until it was too late to back out. The coalition held a gathering after every treaty signing, a grand event called the Concordance Gala, where every species with power lined up their unmarried daughters and let visiting officials choose a companion for the evening. It was supposed to be harmless, ceremonial, a show of goodwill between houses. 9 princesses stood in a row at the far end of the hall, each one glowing under the lights in a way that made the rest of the room look dim by comparison. The Venic princess had eyes like burning coals. The Kolari heir had wings folded neatly behind her shoulders, catching the light every time she shifted her weight. Every single one of them looked like she had been carved from something rare and expensive. And then there was the last one in the line, standing a little apart from the others, wearing a plain gray wrap while everyone else wore silk and jewels. I heard the whispers before I even got close to her. They called her the broken one, the failed line, the shame of her house. Something in her biology had gone wrong before she was born, and she never developed the glowing markings that meant nobility among her people. Without those markings, her own family treated her like a mistake that had somehow survived. 3 different delegates walked past her that night. I watched each one slow down, glance at her, and then keep walking without a word, like she was a crack in the floor they did not want to step near. She did not react. She had clearly done this before, many times, and had learned exactly how to stand still while people decided she was not worth their time. A nervous official named Olin leaned toward me and said quietly that I should choose from the first 8, that the 9th would embarrass everyone involved, including me. I looked at him, then looked back down the line. 8 princesses stood tall and confident, already certain how the evening would end, and one girl in gray stared at a spot on the wall because it was easier than watching another person walk past her. I did not walk toward her to make a statement. I walked toward her because I recognized that look on her face. I had seen it on soldiers who came home from missions nobody thanked them for. I had seen it in hospital wards on people who were told they would never walk again and believed it. I was done watching people arrange themselves so they never had to look at someone who reminded them of their own fear. I stopped in front of her and asked if she would like to dance. The silence in that room turned into something sharper. She looked at me like I had spoken a language she did not expect to hear. She told me I still had 7 other choices before her, not 8. She had already subtracted herself from the count in her own mind, long before I ever arrived. I told her I had already made my choice. Her name was Saris, and she did not know how to dance, because nobody had ever bothered teaching a princess who was never expected to marry. So I taught her, clumsily, both of us stepping on each other while the other princesses watched from the edges of the floor with expressions I could not fully read. Somewhere in the middle of the second song, she stopped glancing at the door, as if waiting for someone to pull me away from her, and started actually paying attention to the conversation instead. That was when the lights flickered. Not the soft dimming that happens during a slow song. A hard, sudden flicker, followed by a low groan somewhere deep in the walls, like the building itself had taken a breath it did not want to release. Saris froze mid-step, and her whole body changed in an instant. The nervous girl who barely wanted to be noticed vanished, replaced by someone scanning the room with sharp, careful eyes. She told me, very quietly, that something was wrong with the power grid beneath the ballroom, and that the flicker pattern was not random. It was rhythmic, controlled. Someone was testing the system before doing something bigger with it. I asked her how she knew that, and she said the same thing that had gotten her mocked her entire life had also taught her to notice details other people overlooked, because she had spent years studying every room she entered for signs that someone was preparing to embarrass her in front of a crowd. Watching for danger had simply become a habit she never got to turn off. I signaled to the security team near the door, but half of them were still watching me and Saris instead of the crowd, distracted by the unusual choice I had made. That distraction, I realized later, might have been exactly what someone else in that room was counting on. The lights flickered again, longer this time, and a low hum spread through the floor beneath our feet. Saris grabbed my arm and pulled me toward the far wall, away from the center of the ballroom, saying that whatever was happening was building toward the middle of the room, right where the treaty documents sat on display for the closing ceremony. I asked her how she could be so certain, and she said the hum was growing stronger near the display table, the same way pressure builds before something breaks. She had grown up watching for exactly this kind of shift, because in her house, danger rarely announced itself directly. It arrived quietly, disguised as something harmless, until it was too late to stop. We moved fast, cutting through startled guests who had no idea anything was wrong yet. I caught sight of a technician near the display table, someone who was not supposed to be there, adjusting a small device hidden beneath the cloth covering the treaty documents. He looked up, saw us moving toward him, and bolted toward a side exit. I chased him through a narrow hallway lined with staff quarters, my boots echoing against the metal floor, while Saris stayed close behind me instead of retreating to safety like most people would have. She shouted directions ahead of me, telling me which turns led to dead ends and which ones connected back to the main hall, information she had apparently memorized out of habit, because knowing every exit in a building was another skill she had picked up from years of needing to disappear quickly. I caught the technician just before he reached a service elevator, pinning him against the wall long enough for the actual security team to arrive and take him into custody. It turned out he had been hired by a rival trading house that stood to lose everything if the Threll Accords were signed successfully that night. The device beneath the treaty table was not meant to hurt anyone physically. It was designed to corrupt the digital signatures the moment the ceremony began, making the entire agreement invalid and throwing the negotiations into chaos for months. Without Saris noticing the pattern in those flickering lights, nobody would have caught it until it was far too late to stop. Word spread through the gala quickly after that, and the atmosphere in the room shifted completely. The officials who had ignored Saris all evening suddenly wanted to know everything about her. They asked how she had noticed the danger before anyone else, and she explained, simply and without any bitterness in her voice, that a lifetime of being overlooked teaches a person to notice things other people miss, because survival depends on it. Alan, the same official who had warned me away from her earlier, now stood beside her asking careful questions and writing down her answers, treating her with a level of respect he had not shown her all night. I watched Saris notice the change too, and for a moment, I saw something new in her expression. Not surprise exactly, but the quiet recognition that maybe, for the first time, people were finally paying attention to who she actually was, instead of what she was not. Later that night, after the treaty had been secured and the documents finally signed without incident, I found her standing near a tall window overlooking the city lights outside. She asked why I had chosen her at the beginning of the evening, before any of this happened, before she had proven herself to anyone. I told her I had not picked her to make a statement about beauty or status or anything the coalition valued so highly. I picked her because I recognized someone who had learned to stay strong even when an entire room decided she was not worth noticing. That kind of strength does not announce itself with glowing markings or expensive jewelry. It shows up quietly, in the way a person keeps standing after being told over and over that she should not. She did not have a response for that at first. I do not think anyone had ever explained her own strength back to her in those words before. By the time the gala ended, Saris was no longer standing apart from the other princesses near the exit. She stood in the middle of them, and for the first time all evening, she was not staring at the floor. If humanity ever needs to explain itself to the rest of the galaxy, that night says most of it. We do not always choose the brightest light in the room. Sometimes we choose the one who has been standing quietly in the dark the longest, because we understand that person often has more strength, more awareness, and more courage than anyone standing under the spotlight ever will.